Hello, my name is Olurotimi Osha. Today is August the 19th, 2026. Today I'm going to be talking about the longest and most successful undercover investigation in FBI history. Also, it was the largest corruption bust in US history. That's the undercover investigation and eventual prosecution of an indictment of 103 government officials, including 48 lawyers and prosecutors, 17 judges, 8 policemen, 10 sheriffs and sheriff's deputies, and other government officials. So 93 government officials had been indicted. In all, about 103 people were prosecuted in what's known as Operation Grey Lord. Operation Grey Lord was it was named after Grey Lord, named after the grey wigs that British judges are known to wear, right? The grey wigs. So this happened in Cook County, Chicago, Illinois is in Cook County. Now, also, what something that resulted from this massive undercover investigation was the first bugging of a judge's chambers. So Judge Wayne W. Olson was the first judge known in US history whose chambers were bugged by the FBI. Now, in after he was indicted in 1983, December 1983, for taking bribes and for corruption, for steering cases to lawyers, and for fixing cases. He was heard in some of the secret taping, right, saying that never kick your janitor in the ass because one day he may become your landlord. This was his reference to when he was a private attorney. Was a private attorney and he had started paying bribes to judges, and so there was a judge who was asking for too much. He started out as a private attorney for a company, whose trucks were ticketed. So he was representing them. So there was this judge who was asking for too much money, and so he used his skills, his bribery skills, to have the case moved from this judge who was asking for too much money to another judge, right? And eventually, when he now left private practice and became a judge himself, he said he became a supervisor of that judge who had been asking for too much, and he said he assigned him nothing. And then he ends it with, the moral of the story is never kick your janitor in the ass because someday he may become your landlord. And so it shows the long history of corruption in the courts in Cook County, the circuit courts in Cook County. So Judge Wayne Olson was a narcotics court judge and a circuit court judge in Cook County, and again, he had a long history. It was revealed in the prosecution that he had a long history of bribes, taking bribes as a judge, and paying bribes to judges while he was in private practice as well. In fact, on the tapes, the secret tapes, from the bugging of his chambers, he liked to boast, about his corruption. That was the irony of it. So he would boast often to other lawyers who were paying him bribes, and you would hear on those tapes in which they're haggling over prices. He's disputing with an attorney. Notorious amongst them was James Costello. James Costello had started off as a policeman, and then he went to law school, became a lawyer, and he was a criminal defense attorney. And Judge Wayne Olson would steer cases to him and fix those cases for this guy to win. And so James Costello would pay him bribes, right, in gratitude. And so you could hear on the bugging device on the listening devices, the recorded tapes, right? So they plant the bugging devices on the judges' chambers, their listening devices, right? Undercover listening devices, and of course they come out as tape recordings that everybody can listen to. So you can hear Judge Wayne Olson arguing with James Costello about price, if James Costello had paid him or not. Judge Wayne Olson again liked to boast about his history of corruption and bribery. He said when he was a private attorney, right? He started off as a private attorney. He said he did not lose a single case because he bribed every judge, right? Every judge that he appeared before. That was why he didn't lose a single case. So he had this long history of corruption, and it just showed you how corrupt the judges in Cook County, in Illinois, Cook County, where they were extremely corrupt. In fact, 3 government officials, as a result of the indictment, committed suicide. One of them was a Judge Alan Rosen. He was a divorce court judge, and there were secret hearing devices that revealed that he had been collecting bribes in the divorce court, right, to decide divorce courts, to decide divorce cases and property disputes in divorce proceedings and child custody issues. And so he decided those cases based on the bribes that had been paid to him by the parties, right? And he committed suicide once he had been indicted. That's Judge Alan Rosen. Now, the judge who had the highest, who faced the most severe penalty was a judge called Thomas Maloney. He faced 18 years. Now, this judge, Wayne Olson, who was the first judge ever to be bugged, whose chambers, a judge's offices are called chambers, whose chambers was the first to be bugged by the FBI, received 12 years in federal prison. He was convicted and spent 12 years in federal prison, and he was required to pay a restitution, a fine of $35,000. He's the other person, the lawyer who had been caught on these tapes paying bribes to the judge, was James Costello. He was sentenced to 8 years in prison. That's James Costello. Now, it's important to note, I want to keep this video short. So this is the first time, like I said, the first time a judge had his chambers bugged by the FBI, right? And the person who sort of instigated it was a guy called Terry Hake. Terry Hake wrote a book, Operation Grey Lord. I read it. It's interesting. So Terry Hake was a young state prosecutor in Cook County, and he realized that a case that he was prosecuting had been rigged, that it was fixed, and he complained about it. And so the FBI got interested, and the FBI approached him and asked if he would be an undercover, wear listening devices so they could investigate the corruption, the corrupt judges, because it was an entire racket, right? So if you have a corrupt judge in a county or in an area in a court, he's not the only one who's doing it. So the judge had bagmen. A bagman is a person, it's a term that's used to describe the delivery person, the person who is the conduit to transfer money, because many times maybe the judge is not collecting money directly from the attorney, right? Because sometimes they're cautious. Wayne Olson was, he was brash because he had been doing it for a very long time. So, and he was, he just thought, okay, he would never be caught. But it was discovered that in Cook County they had bagmen, and their bagmen were actually the clerk of court, right? The deputy clerk of court, a guy called Cone. he was the first person to be indicted, actually. So he was the bag man, the delivery man, who was one who solicited the bribes from the attorneys and gave the money to the judges. So they had a whole racket, right? Again, like I said, it involved sheriff's deputies, and the policemen as well, police officers, judges, the prosecutors, etc. So the FBI approached Terry Hake and had him wear listening devices and to pose as a corrupt prosecutor, right? That he would throw his cases to the defense, and he would pay judges. That was the main thing. They were trying to catch the judges, right, who were in this corrupt racket. So he would approach judges and pay them money, ask their price, and so the judges didn't know, and they didn't realize that, okay, he was actually working undercover. So Terry Hake was working for the FBI, posing as an undercover crooked state assistant state attorney. That's also a prosecutor. So he did this for a while, and also he helped them plant this bug, the listening devices in the chambers of judges that he paid bribes to. Eventually he moved over to private practice as well, and continued just to demonstrate that the judges were not only collecting money from the prosecutors, but they were also collecting bribes from the defense attorneys as well. Again, 48 lawyers and prosecutors were indicted. Most of them were convicted. Of the 17 judges that were indicted, 15 of them were convicted successfully. I'm going to stop this video here, and I'm going to talk more about the Operation Grey Lord and the public corruption and the successful prosecution and conviction of corrupt judges in Cook County. One can use this to channel it to Montgomery County, Maryland, right? I've been a victim of the conspiratorial obstruction of justice and public corruption of judges in Montgomery County, Maryland. I've talked about Judge James Bonifant. I've talked about Judge BBM Berry, and now there's also Judge Michael McAuliffe. My name is Oluro Timiosha. I'll keep you posted. Thank you.